If you've eaten leftover rice, chicken, or potatoes in the last 48 hours, what I'm about to reveal could be the most important 15 minutes you spend on your health this entire year. Right now, inside your body, there is a small organ sitting quietly behind your stomach. It weighs less than 3 ounces. You probably never think about it. But here is what terrifies me as a doctor. Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of just 13%. 13. And new research is showing that one of the biggest hidden triggers has nothing to do with genetics, nothing to do with smoking, and everything to do with something you are probably doing in your kitchen 2 or 3 times a week without a second thought. Reheating food. Now hold on. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds extreme. You're thinking, I've been reheating leftovers my entire life, and I'm fine. And you might be right. But stay with me because after 31 years of treating patients with gastrointestinal cancers, I can tell you with absolute certainty that the patients who ended up in my office with late-stage pancreatic cancer were not the ones doing something obviously dangerous. They were the ones doing something that seemed completely harmless. Something their mothers taught them. Something they did every single day without question. And that is exactly what makes this so dangerous. I'm Dr. James Hargrove, and I've spent over 3 decades specializing in gastroenterology and oncology prevention. I've treated thousands of patients. I've held the hands of people who were told they had 6 months to live. And the thing that haunts me most is that so many of those cases, especially in patients over 60, had connections to daily habits that could have been modified years earlier. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here because I genuinely believe this information can protect you, the same way I protect my own parents, who are in their 80s, by making sure they understand exactly what I'm about to share with you today. So here is what we are going to do. I'm going to walk you through the 5 most dangerous reheated foods that are silently increasing your risk of pancreatic cancer. I'll explain exactly what happens inside your body at the cellular level, in plain language, not medical textbook nonsense. And at the very end, I'm going to give you a simple 30-day kitchen protocol that costs you nothing and could dramatically reduce your risk. But first, you need to understand why your pancreas is so uniquely vulnerable. And this is something that 95% of doctors never explain to their patients. Your pancreas is essentially a chemical factory. It produces insulin. It produces digestive enzymes. Every single thing you eat passes through a system that your pancreas has to process. Now here is the part that changes everything. After the age of 60, your pancreas starts to lose its regenerative capacity. The cells that line your pancreatic ducts become less efficient at repairing DNA damage. At the same time, your body's ability to neutralize carcinogenic compounds decreases by roughly 40 to 60% compared to when you were 30. So when a 35-year-old eats reheated food containing trace amounts of cancer-promoting compounds, their body can usually handle it. Their repair mechanisms kick in. The damage gets fixed. But when you're 65, 70, 75, those repair mechanisms are running on fumes. The damage accumulates, layer after layer, meal after meal, year after year, and your pancreas, this quiet little organ that never complains, eventually reaches a tipping point. Let me tell you about Margaret. She was 71 years old when she came to see me. She was a retired school teacher from Ohio, the kind of woman who did everything right. She walked every morning. She took her vitamins. She ate what she thought was a healthy diet. But Margaret had one habit she never questioned. Every Sunday she would cook a large batch of chicken, rice, and vegetables, and she would reheat portions of that same meal throughout the entire week. Monday through Friday, every lunch, microwaved leftovers. She'd been doing this for over 20 years. When we discovered a tumor in the head of her pancreas, the first thing she said to me was, "But I don't smoke. I barely drink. How is this possible?" That question broke my heart, because the truth is, Margaret's cancer wasn't caused by one single thing. But the pattern of repeated exposure to reheated food compounds over 2 decades had created exactly the kind of chronic cellular environment where pancreatic cancer thrives. Now let me walk you through these 5 foods, and I'm going to count down from number 5 to number 1 because the most dangerous one, the one that shocked even me when I reviewed the latest research, is at the very end. Stay with me through all 5, because number 1 is a food that nearly every senior in the country reheats multiple times a week. Number 5. Reheated spinach and leafy greens. Now I know this sounds counterintuitive. Spinach is supposed to be a superfood, and when it's fresh, it absolutely is. Spinach, beets, celery, and leafy greens are loaded with natural nitrates that are wonderful for blood pressure and cardiovascular health. But here is what nobody is telling you. When you cook spinach and then reheat it, especially in a microwave, something fundamentally changes at the molecular level. Those beneficial nitrates convert into nitrites. And when those nitrites combine with the amino acids in your digestive system during metabolism, they form compounds called nitrosamines. If that word sounds familiar, it should. Nitrosamines are among the most well-documented cancer-promoting compounds in all of oncology research. The European Food Safety Authority specifically flagged reheated nitrate-rich vegetables as a concern back in 2017 and reinforced that position in subsequent reviews. Let me tell you about Robert, 68 years old, a retired firefighter from New Jersey. Robert was a health-conscious man. After his retirement, he started making large batches of cooked spinach with garlic and olive oil every few days. He'd reheat portions throughout the week. His wife did the same. When Robert came to me with persistent abdominal pain that his GP had dismissed for months, we found a lesion on his pancreas. Now, I'm not saying his spinach caused his cancer. Cancer is complex, but his pattern of repeated nitrosamine exposure from reheated greens was absolutely a contributing environmental factor, and it was completely avoidable. My recommendation is simple. Cook your greens fresh and eat them hot. If you have leftovers, eat them cold the next day as a salad with a little olive oil and lemon. They're delicious that way, and you eliminate the nitrosamine conversion entirely. Number 4. Reheated potatoes. Before I get into the science here, drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing where you're watching from. This channel reaches people in over 90 countries, and it reminds me every day why this work matters. Hit that like button too if you're learning something new. It helps more seniors find this information, and that could save someone's life. Now, potatoes. They're a comfort food, they're affordable, they're filling, and for many seniors on fixed incomes, they're a dietary staple. I get it. I'm not going to tell you to stop eating potatoes, but I need you to understand what happens when you cook potatoes, let them cool, and then blast them with high heat a second time. The answer is a compound called acrylamide. Acrylamide forms when starchy foods are exposed to high temperatures. The International Agency for Research on Cancer has classified acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen, and here is the kicker. The levels of acrylamide that develop in reheated potatoes, particularly those reheated in a microwave or fried a second time, can be significantly higher than in freshly cooked potatoes. Studies involving over 60,000 participants have found consistent associations between high acrylamide intake and elevated risk of several cancers, with pancreatic cancer appearing in a meaningful portion of that research. But it doesn't stop there. Potatoes that have been cooked, cooled, and stored improperly can also develop Bacillus cereus toxins, the same bacterial problem I'm going to tell you about with rice. This double hit of acrylamide plus bacterial toxins creates a compounding inflammatory assault on your gastrointestinal tract and, by extension, your pancreas. I had a patient named Arthur. He was 74 years old, a Korean War veteran, tough as nails. Arthur loved his wife's roasted potatoes so much that she would make a huge tray every Sunday, and he'd reheat portions in the oven all week. When Arthur was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 2019, he was stunned. He'd been healthy his entire life, barely took any medications. His wife told me, "We thought we were being smart. We were saving money and eating at home instead of going out." And she was right about the saving money part. But the reheating pattern had been a hidden risk factor for years. Here is my practical advice for potatoes. Eat them fresh whenever possible. If you have leftover boiled potatoes, eat them cold. A cold potato salad with olive oil, herbs, and a little vinegar is not only safe, it actually contains more resistant starch, which feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut. You get better nutrition, and you eliminate the acrylamide risk entirely. Number 3. Reheated rice, and this is where things get genuinely alarming. Rice seems like the most harmless food on earth. It's bland. It's basic. It's what you give someone when their stomach is upset. But rice has a hidden characteristic that makes it uniquely dangerous when handled improperly. Uncooked rice contains dormant spores of a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. When you cook rice, you kill the active bacteria, but not the spores. Those spores survive the cooking process. And when cooked rice sits at room temperature, even for as little as 1 to 2 hours, those spores activate, multiply rapidly, and produce heat-stable toxins that are not destroyed by reheating. Let me say that again because it's critical. The toxins survive reheating. You can microwave that rice until it's boiling hot and those toxins are still there. Now here is the connection that concerns me deeply. Repeated exposure to these bacterial toxins triggers chronic low-grade inflammation throughout the gastrointestinal tract. And chronic inflammation is not just a risk factor for pancreatic cancer. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which pancreatic cancer develops. We know this from decades of research on chronic pancreatitis patients, whose long-term inflammation of the pancreas dramatically increases their cancer risk. But there's another layer that most doctors don't discuss. When rice is cooked, cooled, and reheated multiple times, it undergoes a process called starch retrogradation. The molecular structure of the starch changes in ways that cause sharper blood sugar spikes when you eat it, and every blood sugar spike forces your pancreas to work harder to produce insulin. For the estimated 40% of Americans over 65 who have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, this repeated metabolic stress on an already overtaxed pancreas is a genuine concern. Let me tell you about Helen. She was 69. A widow living alone in Sacramento. Helen cooked a big pot of rice every 3 days and reheated it for meals throughout the week. It was practical, it was easy, and she had been doing it for as long as she could remember. When Helen developed unexplained weight loss and back pain, her doctor initially suspected kidney issues. It took 4 months and 3 doctors before a CT scan revealed a mass on her pancreas. Helen's cancer was caught at stage 3. She fought bravely for 14 months. Helen's story is the reason I make these videos. Because if she had known about the bacterial toxin issue with reheated rice, if someone had told her to simply cook smaller portions fresh each day or refrigerate her rice within 60 minutes and only reheat it once, that simple change might have removed one critical piece from the puzzle that led to her diagnosis. My recommendation for rice is specific. Cook what you need for 1 meal. If you must store rice, get it into the refrigerator within 1 hour of cooking. Never let it sit on the counter. Reheat it only once to a steaming hot temperature throughout, not just warm on the outside. And never reheat it a second time. Throw away any rice that has been reheated once already. Number 2. Reheated processed and smoked meats. And here's what changes everything about what you thought was a harmless breakfast. Bacon, sausage, deli meats, hot dogs, ham. These foods are already classified by the World Health Organization as Group 1 carcinogens. That is the same category as tobacco and asbestos. Not the same level of risk, but the same level of scientific certainty that they cause cancer. That classification alone should make you think twice. But here is what makes reheating these foods dramatically worse. When processed meats are heated a second time, particularly at high temperatures, the nitrites and nitrates they contain undergo accelerated chemical transformation. They form nitrosamines at concentrations that can be 2 to 4 times higher than in the freshly cooked product. And nitrosamines have been implicated in pancreatic cancer in study after study after study, spanning over 30 years of published research. The science is clear. A 2021 meta-analysis published in the International Journal of Cancer reviewed data from over 1.2 million participants across 24 studies. The findings were unambiguous. High intake of processed meats was associated with a statistically significant increase in pancreatic cancer risk. And that analysis didn't even isolate the reheating factor, which we now believe amplifies the risk even further. I'll never forget a patient named James. He was 73 years old.